Our second part of the live stream Q&A, Ask Me Anything for the week of, what is this week? I think it's still technically Sunday's the beginning of the new week, or Monday, depending on how you think about it, but I think it's the week of December 14th, 13th, whatever. So we are bringing you some live Q&A today for the next hour or so, where we will be discussing important historical events, topics, moments in history that have affected both the long past, affecting the near past, affecting the present, and obviously recent current events that have affected the present, all types of history from ancient to contemporary. That's what we're here to do. Every friendly neighborhood historian gets to ask a question, put in a comment, type what they'd like to learn about and what they are interested in. That is what we do here every Friday and Saturday. Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We had a lovely Q&A yesterday, and with my wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny, at the helm, we're seeking to have another really interesting and exciting one today, where you can drop and talk about any social studies topics that you would like to discuss: geopolitics, past and present, geography, and obviously the big H, history. That is what we are all about at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And if you enjoy learning about history and social studies, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. We are on the march to 6,000, a legion of Friendly Neighborhood Historians. And speaking of legions, tomorrow in our third part of our weekend Q&A, our third weekend live stream, we will be discussing the history of the ancient Roman Republic and the creation of the legionary system and the creation of the SPQR, the Senatus Publicus et Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome, and how that became the dominant force, not just in Italy, but throughout most of the ancient world, and how it set up the Roman Empire, and how it emerged in response to tyranny, and how the first Republican government was set up. That's Republican with a small r. We will be talking about that tomorrow at our weekly live stream at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please join us to talk about the history of the Roman Republic. We're really looking forward to sharing some history about that with you. And today, it's everything you want to talk about. Any questions, comments, concerns, historical issues you want to bring up, or if you just want to listen and pay attention and maybe learn something new or contribute to the chat in some way, shape, or form. I'm just glad you're here. It's always great to see you. My social medias are in the handle. Please follow me there, like and subscribe, and join the growing near legion of Friendly Neighborhood Historians. We are edging our way closer and closer. We're about 95% of the way there. Currently standing, I think, at like 5685 or something. So yeah, like and subscribe, follow the channel, keep up to date with my short videos and long length videos where I discuss certain historical topics and different issues. I am currently doing a series on powerful female rulers and leaders throughout history, and so I will be doing one tonight about Dilma Rousseff, the first female president of a Latin American country, or at least of Brazil, and we will be talking about the importance there. So yes, check out those videos, like and subscribe, follow the channel, come back for the live stream lecture where I talk about the Roman Republic, and join us next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Get your weekend started off right on Fridays with asking some questions about history, and follow it up with even more questions and answers on Saturday, and join that growing legion. The goal is 6,000 by the end of the year, and I think we can do a holiday rush and get there. Learn some history. I'll be doing videos about the history of Christmas and Christmas traditions and legends, just like I did with Halloween, Indigenous Peoples Day, and Thanksgiving. So take a look at that, and I hope you really, really enjoy it. So I've got some questions in the chat already. Daniel's here. It's great to see you. Why is the Middle East so unstable? So there's several reasons why the Middle East is unstable, and this is an issue that's obviously extremely relevant right now based on what's happening in Syria and obviously the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. So the Middle East is unstable because of divisions not between Arabs and non-Arab peoples, but between different types of Islam that have created centuries of tribalistic beliefs and ideas that have permeated this region of the world. 200 years ago, there was no Syria, there wasn't really Lebanon, there was no Israel, there was no Saudi Arabia. It was just called Arabia back then. Most of the land was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottomans during the 1500s and 1600s and early 1700s were fighting a people called the Safavid Persians, who were Shiite Muslims, as the Ottomans were Sunni. So the division between Sunni and Shiite obviously caused big tensions. Now, the vast majority of Muslims around the world, in some of the largest Muslim countries in the world, like Indonesia is the largest Muslim population in the world, in Nepal and in India, they're Sunni Muslims. But in 1501, the founder of the Safavid Persian Empire, I'm trying to remember his name, Babur, I think, he started the 12 Shia Islam, where he claimed to be a direct descendant of Muhammad. And in Islam, 12 Shia Islam believes that only the descendants of Muhammad can rule over the Muslim people, whereas the Sunnis believe that the most virtuous, loyal, and religious of Muhammad's followers should be the rightful caliph or leader of the caliphate, the Islamic State. And so this was a battle between different imperial powers that divided that region of what we now call the Middle East. Then the Europeans got their fingers involved before, during, and after World War I, trying to undermine and destroy the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire collapses after World War I, and because the Europeans believe that everybody in the Middle East is inferior and a bunch of barbarians and uncivilized savages, they decide to create mandates. These are territories where they have an oversight over their foreign policy and economic policy, but they are also teaching them, while colonizing them at the same time, to get on their own 2 feet, create a stable form of self-government, and then become an independent nation. They did this in Arabia until the Saud family, based on an agreement of the use of oil and gasoline, agreed to basically recognize a pact with the British for oil, which was obviously the fastest growing commodity in the early 20th century. So the Saudi family, who promised that to the British and the Westerners, was recognized in the 30s as the rightful rulers of the Arab peoples, and that is why it is called Saudi Arabia. 3 centuries ago, the Sauds were just a family in Arabia trying to garner and wage influence as much as possible and chafing under their Ottoman overlords, as many Muslim peoples did throughout the Middle East, despite the fact that the Ottomans had been Muslims themselves. So you have that in Saudi Arabia. Then you have France taking over what is Syria and Iraq and that middle region of the Middle East, and eventually giving over power to strong leaders and controllers. Eventually Assad, eventually Saddam Hussein. Assad's father was the first Assad to rule over, and then he gave power to his son, who is the president, which is just a fancy term in that area for dictator of that region. And so there's instability between, because of the Europeans basically playing favorites and setting up warlords who can rule over these lands. And that creates tension. And of course, you have centuries-old tensions between Sunni and Shiites and different types of Muslims and tribalistic groups. It's the same thing in Afghanistan. Pakistan and India are divided along religious lines by the British because they won't stop fighting each other. Russia and Britain fight over influence and control in Afghanistan for decades in what is a Cold War, basically, in the 1800s, called the Great Game. So to answer your question, I'm touching on all the Middle East and even South Asia. The Middle East is unstable for several reasons. 1, Islamic divisions. 2, the European influx and influence after World War I. 3, tribalistic warlords, kleptocrats, and bureaucrats trying to gain as much power as possible, similar to Africa in the 1960s and 70s, when the European empires dissolved and gave them their independence. And then those are some of the reasons. And then one of the final reasons is the creation of the State of Israel and the Zionist movement in general, with the Balfour Declaration and the British and later the League of Nations and the United States all rallying around this movement of Jews, usually leaving Eastern Europe, to go back to Israel and create a Jewish state in their ancient land. That ruffled a lot of feathers amongst the Muslims who lived in that area, who were Bedouinic peoples, who were Arab and Egyptian and kind of mixed and Semitic, as Arabs are technically Semitic peoples, and that created, obviously, the Palestinian people who were at odds with the Israelis. Interestingly enough, as I said in the live stream yesterday, and you guys can go check that out if you want, but basically throughout most of the 1900s, after the Israelis started moving back to, the Jews started moving back to Israel or Palestine, they were called Palestinians. So the Israelis were actually Palestinian Jews. And eventually, of course, they became Israelis when in 1948, the UN, with basically the US and Britain pushing the button, said that Israel would be its own country, invoking the hatred of both the Muslims and Arabs in the region, as well as the Soviets who were backing them, seeing them as oppressed by the capitalist Jews. Which is interesting because many of the founders of the Soviet Union were Jewish. Lenin, Trotsky, Marx was a Jew. So interestingly enough. So I think those 3 reasons. And I think that there's a 4th emerging reason that's obvious at this point, and it's U.S. involvement in the region backfiring. The path to hell is paved with good intentions, and the U.S. has been full of good intentions, but not the results it would want in that region of the world, because you have the U.S. trying to play God, first in Iran, it's not Iraq, but in Iran in the 1970s, thinking that the Shah was too brutal of a dictator, the king of Iran, The Carter administration refused to give him the support he needed in order to keep power over a rising influx of student protests, liberals, and radical Muslims who hijacked the revolutionary movement and took power and created the radical Islamic Shia state that controls Iran to this day, that is hell-bent on terrorist activity and radical Islamic behavior. Now, where does radical Islamic behavior come from? Now, there are sections of the Quran and Sharia law that obviously advocate for these sorts of behaviors, but rather than reinterpreting these, as many people have reinterpreted the Old and New Testament to be anti-violence, a new school of thought in Islam in the last, 150 years, called Wahhabism, which emerged in Arabia, has basically demanded that the way the Muslims will be successful is with strict adherence to their law, and it's strict adherence to the hadiths, the biographies of Muhammad, and strict adherence to ancient Muslim practices. And that is why you have the repressive Sharia law in places like Saudi Arabia and Iran, which is constantly criticized by Westerners. In Persia, in the 1950s and 60s, women went to school, drove, and wore skirts. In the 1980s, not so much. That's what happened. So the United States wanted to create a liberal democracy and get rid of a dictatorship, which they felt was hurting the people, which it certainly was, but the replacement might have been more damaging to the U.S. international interest and prestige, and might have been more damaging to the Iranian people. The next mistake is obviously probably the biggest and easiest example is the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, which had nothing to do with the 9/11 terrorist attacks, was all based on threats, empty threats by a dictator, Saddam Hussein, who had already collapsed in power in the early 90s and was just trying to flex his muscles. The U.S. fell for it, and that led to the invasion of Iraq. It saw Saddam toppled and a short experiment created with democracy, but that has been overwhelmed by terrorist activity that continues to this day. The U.S. still has troops in Iraq, and the fight against ISIS with the emergence of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, which is the region of Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Israel. So that state has been that was obviously a surprise to the United States, a huge backfire. The war in Afghanistan dragged on, and eventually we went from Taliban rule to Taliban rule after 20 years of fighting and bloodshed. And now it seems as though the United States might be headed down that way. Time will only tell, but the results of what's happened in Syria may not be what Americans think that they are. We'll have to see. We're going to have to take a deep breath. It's too early, but even cautious optimism doesn't seem to be fitting based off of the history of the Syrian rebels, who the U.S. helped to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. So strong warlords, U.S. intervention, the creation of a Jewish state, which has led to the dispossession of land of Palestinians and the anger and generations of bitterness, hatred, and violence from both Jews and Palestinians and Arabs because of that, and the divisions between the Muslims. And of course, if I were to nail a fifth one, it would be European intervention after World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire. So Daniel, I know that's a long, long answer, but it's to a great question. And I don't think the Middle East is getting any better. I think it's only getting worse. And I think the U.S. might be better served staying out of this one. They've done enough damage as it is. So no one knows who invented shawarma or hummus. That's true. Who's the best rapper? Preferably the ones who are not doing things, inappropriate things with young people. I've already seen you here in Brazil. Well, I'm doing a video about Brazil. I love Brazil, great country. When was the woke political perspective invented? So wokeness as a modern political invention, which has become all the rage to hate on or to defend or nuance its perspective, is based on the critical theory school, which emerged in the 1950s and 60s from Frankfurt, a group of philosophers with neo-Marxist and postmodernist ideals mixed together, who reapplied Marxist dialectical ideals from the oppression of the haves versus the have-nots to other social and cultural categories: gay versus straight, male versus female, rich versus poor still, the haves versus the have-nots, like Marx talked about, and sought to take the philosophy of Marx and reapply it in certain contexts so that they could have social change as much as economic change. It was a reinterpretation of Marxist doctrine after the struggles of the Soviet Union were unveiled in the 1940s and 50s, thanks to people like George Orwell in 1984. So so woke ideology, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to stretch it out to include, has been a bifurcation of that, with this need to tell and retell narratives, revising them as necessary to include the perspectives of the marginalized, people who are not heteronormative, people who don't look like me, non-white, non-straight, people, men who have, and to give them their space in not only the history books, but the cultural books, and for acknowledging and making remedies for this. This is why in a state like California, there is a huge effort right now to give reparations to African Americans based on their socioeconomic standing and disadvantage compared proportionally to white Americans. So Daniel, the truth of the matter is woke ideology surfaces from reinterpretations and reapplications of Marxist dogma based in new cultural contexts, particularly the United States. And the reason the United States is the obvious and biggest target of this is because I wouldn't say target, or the biggest, whatever you want to call it, object or target, depending on your perspective, is because the United States is probably the most diverse of these places. So they can reinterpret the colonized, oppressed narrative in Africa and South America, but they can also look at the United States. You have the Native Americans being displaced. You have colonizers, the white men. You have men mistreating women. You have gays being mistreated by straight people in a heteronormative environment. Now a new filter of this, which is all called intersectionality, is trans people versus cisgendered people. And it's divisive to some extent, but it's also meant to draw attention to historic injustices and let voices be heard. So make of that what you will. That is just a historical understanding of where it comes from, and I could be wrong. There could be more to the story, but it is based in the works of men like Herbert Gramsci, or no, I think it's Herbert Gramsci, Marcuse, Michel Foucault, and all of these people who reinterpreted lenses using post-structural and postmodern analysis, where truth was constructed not based on agreed upon facts, but upon narratives relevant to a particular group of people in a particular context. So that is where I see woke ideology as, and I'm trying to be as you picked a good one, Daniel. It's a great question, but it is a difficult it's a difficult theory to think about, and it causes a lot of division here in the United States, and I know it has similar effects in Britain, Africa, and most of Europe. So it can be as simple as retelling stories, or reinventing stories to feature or impress upon non-white, non-majority, non-straight, non-male characters. I think there's a place for that and a need for that. We need to do history from below. We need those perspectives understood and added onto. And I think that we will be poor historians, poor people of truth if we do not do that. So, Daniel, that's what I'm looking at there. So if you're liking what I'm talking about, please consider liking and subscribing, dropping a topic or comment or question you want to discuss with me. This is what we are going to be doing for the next 40 minutes. Daniel has 2 very good questions, and I gave very deep answers. I'm going to try to give as deep an answer as possible, but not go on a rant. But if a genie came to you and said you can go back and witness one moment in time at one location for 30 minutes only, where would you be? You witness it as a ghost and cannot share with anyone. So the Scrooge thing, where I go back with a ghost of Christmas past. Napoleon at Waterloo. I want to know what's going through his mind. I want to know what he's doing. I also want to be there when the Winter Palace is stormed, and I'm a Russian historian and Eastern European focus. I want to see what happened to what actually happened, because there's a lot of debate about how the Russian Revolution under the Bolsheviks and the Marxists under Lenin actually began in Russia. So, Rodolfo, great to see you. From Miami, wonderful. So great to see you. Hello. You want to be president one day or what? No, I don't want to be president because I'm a historian. I know exactly the history of politics and how difficult the job of the president is. I have no desire to become a president or politician of any way, shape, or form. I just made a video today analyzing the words of Senator Joe Manchin, who is retiring from the state of West Virginia. And in it, Manchin discusses the difficulties of the two-party system and how that duopoly controls all of the narratives, and how hard it is to be a free thinker. And I analyzed how that's what the founders would have agreed with Manchin and wanted his idea to come from. So I'm not going to get into the political fray of things. But if you want to vote for me and write in my name, Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, that's fine with me. I won't complain. I don't know what you're asking. I'm doing my best to be as much of a textbook as possible. What's good? How does the situation in the Middle East affect African geopolitics? I don't know if it directly affects it. I think there's a lot of issues surrounding the rise of Islam and traditional Catholicism and Christianity in Africa that has created a lot of tension. Right now, Nigeria is the fastest growing country in the world because of its large Muslim population. There's obviously a lot of investment from Iran and other radical Muslim countries in organizations in Africa that are pushing more radical agendas. Boko Haram is a great example of this. Maybe, I don't know if they're funded by Iran, but I think there's a connection there. Another example of this would be if you look at Egypt, if you want to call Egypt Africa or the Middle East, but it's still in that crux, that crossroads. The reason that so many Palestinians were targeted at Rafah, at the southern border of Gaza, was not because of the Israelis necessarily, partially because of them, but also the Egyptians sealed the border to Rafah and did not allow any Palestinians to come into Egypt. And the reason for this is because the Egyptian government was worried that Hamas freedom fighters, freedom fighters is such a bad word, terrorists, they're not freedom fighters, what a ridiculous thing to say, from Hamas terrorists would influence the Muslim Brotherhood to overthrow the Egyptian military government, which is another example of a government that was dictatorial but destabilized by the U.S. during the Arab Spring in the early 2010s when I was in high school. So, so there's some overlap there, but not a direct one, I would say. Yep, there's always something creepy behind me. Check it out. Look back at the antiques. I'm a historian. It's what I do. Religion is a plague on humanity. Even in 2024, humans are still fighting holy wars. Yes, but I don't think that you can say that religion is a plague without understanding the two-sided nature of religion. Yes, you have violent histories. You have the Crusades. You have Hindu extremism. You have the Amida Buddhists and the assassins in Japan in the Middle Ages, a lot of people do not talk about. And of course, you have radical Islamic terrorism. That radical Islamic terrorism is juxtaposed with the Islamic Golden Age in the when Europe was going through the Middle Ages and getting back on its feet after the fall of the Roman Empire. Muslim influence, culture, religious diversity, tolerance was spreading, as well as inventions like algebra and modern scientific discoveries, as well as a synthesis of ancient religious texts with classical antiquarian philosophy like Aristotle and Plato. And that was done by Muslims like Averroes. And Maimonides, the famous Jewish philosopher whose birthday was yesterday, whose birthday was yesterday, said or preferred to live in Muslim lands and died there rather than in Christian lands in Spain. And you have the Crusades, but you also have Mother Teresa, you have Martin Luther King, you have Christianity and its fight for social justice. You have to take both and look at both of them and see what they have done in the world. And you have to look at bad and good. Saying religion is only one thing or the other is not a historically responsible thing to say. But I understand where you're coming from. There's a lot of people who hate religion, and I very much sympathize. Ronald Reagan destroyed this country. Yeah, that's a common feeling. I don't know if Reagan is the only culprit of it. I don't think Reagan was perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The historiography is very interesting because Reagan was beloved by many Americans for a long time. The reinterpretation of Reagan's legacy in the 2010s and 2020s has really damaged it. But after the Cold War, after the economic surge of the 1980s, many people believed Reagan was Mount Rushmore worthy or was in the top 10 or top 5 of presidents. He's still routinely considered a top 10 president in U.S. history, even by historians who are more liberal. Reagan had a lot of problems, but he had a lot of good traits. Yeah, the Israelis took the Sinai Peninsula, which I actually have said during this war, if they could make some deal, have the Palestinians take the Sinai and let that be their region. In fact, the British originally wanted to give them the Transjordanian region, but the Hashemites basically bought it from the British and took the Transjordanian region, which is now the country of Jordan, interestingly enough. So let's see here. Jan, good to see you. I'm doing my best to be as good as possible. No, Tanuki, I never said the Shah was a nice man. I never said Saddam was. I never said that the Taliban was nice. I never said any of these things or people were nice. I am saying, and Assad killing 500,000 of his own people, certainly not nice. But what is your alternative? Is your alternative better? What is the alternative option? So, Okay, the Abrahamic God was a thunder warrior God. I'm not surprised Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people are violent. That's not fully, A, that's not true. B, there is violence in every history of each of these religions, Jews to a lesser degree than Christians and Muslims because they do not proselytize. There's violence in every holy book. Hindus are very violent. Their God is not based on the Abrahamic God. Buddhists have violent sects, although most Buddhists are pacifistic. And when they weren't pacifistic, they got kicked out of. And when they were pacifistic, a lot of in India, many of them got kicked out by the Muslims. So there is this way in which religion, I don't think is the catalyst, but I think is the vehicle that people use as an excuse to be violent, aggressive, war hungry, and power hungry. They seize religion as the crux because they know how much it means to ordinary people, and that's giving religion the benefit of the doubt. Yes. Saying Iran is radical is an understatement. Take it from an Iraqi. Yes. You're an Iraqi. I'm so glad you're here. That's right. We've seen you before, Anas. It's so great to see you. Yes, it's true. It's not. It is an understatement. The U.S. wanted oil. Well, they didn't even get oil because despite the invasion of Iraq, oil prices have skyrocketed in the last 15 years in this country. So, yeah. I don't know if the U.S. ever cared for democracy, but they pretend that they do. And Churchill said the U.S. will do the right thing after they've tried everything else. So maybe that's what's fitting there. So I'm trying to go for Navy wins. I saw a little bit of that. It was interesting. I love football, but I love NFL football more than college. Do you know Sudan? Yes, ABCD. I know Sudan very well. The Kingdom of Askum, the ancient Nubian Kush people who actually conquered Egypt and made Egypt an African kingdom for centuries. Basically, whenever Egypt was ever conquered by the Assyrians or the Greeks or the Romans to a smaller extent, or the Kush Nubians, who had once been slaves and conquered by the Egyptians, they basically restylized them as themselves as the pharaoh. You have a Ptolemaic line of the Greeks. The Assyrians called themselves pharaohs after they conquered Egypt, and so did the Kush Nubians. And I think that's like 600-700 BC. So yeah, Egypt got a lot of, or 400 BC, something like that. But yeah, and Sudan is also the Kingdom of Askum later on, a very fascinating country, very powerful. Like many African countries, relied on extensive trade routes and camels and deep connections with different cultures. And of course, it was eventually integrated into the British Empire as part of Britain's Eastern African hegemony in the late 19th century. How did the U.S. get Florida? Daniel, I love this question because Andrew Jackson, the man on the $28 bill, one of the most overrated presidents in U.S. history, the man who started the Trail of Tears, destroyed the U.S. economy, and was one of the most racist presidents ever, and a slave owner, something we don't talk about, because he was aggressive and fun, and he had a bullet in his chest because he was shot and withstood it. And it would have been too much. He would have died if they had taken the bullet out. But basically, in 1819, Seminole Indians were invading Georgia and attacking settlers there. And so President Monroe sent Jackson into Florida to basically defeat the tribes. And Jackson found the Spanish governor asleep at the wheel, and the Spanish basically laying on their butts not doing anything. And so he overthrew the governor and established the Americans as in charge of the territory, almost causing a war with the Spanish Empire. But the U.S. bought Florida from Spain because of that and completed the eastern Atlantic seaboard in 1819, thanks to the aggressiveness of Andrew Jackson. So let me see here. Yeah, I don't know. I hope I don't get drafted. That would be terrible. Let me see here. I'm loving the comment section too. There's so much here. Mystic No, do you want to know more about Brazil? Because I'd be happy to talk about it. Brazil, the only country in Latin America that speaks Portuguese instead of Spanish. Because of the Portuguese and the Treaty of Tordesillas, the Portuguese basically tripled the amount of land they had on the eastern seaboard of South America and took over this large place with wood and silver and gold, which they populated the mines with natives. And when the natives died off, they brought the largest amount of Africans to Brazil, because the Portuguese are the ones who started the African slave trade between the Africans and the Europeans, and that's why there's a large number of Africans and mulattoes in Brazil to this day. And of course, because of that, Brazil speaks Portuguese. It gained its independence in the 1820s after the King of Portugal had been forced to flee because Napoleon had tried to put his brother in charge of Portugal, Joseph Bonaparte. King John III fled with his son Dom Pedro and basically went back to Portugal and Brazil, said they didn't want him to be their ruler, and they selected Dom Pedro, his young son, to be the emperor, the first Brazilian emperor. So in 1821, 1822, same time all the other Latin American countries were getting their independence, Brazil also got its independence. So a little bit about that too. I don't know if you were asking about that, but just doing my best. Yep, let me see here. Apache at the, yeah. I'm so glad that I sound like that. I'm doing my absolute best. Can you talk a little bit about piracy? So I'll set for out the Caribbean and so on board question. I know. Yeah, broad question. Yeah, I can't. So Seth, it's so great to see you, and I love your questions always. When we think of Pirates of the Caribbean, literally, people like Blackbeard and Captain Kidd, things like that. We think about these Redbeard. This was during a very small sliver of time. There's a pirate golden age, late 1600s, early 1700s, but piracy had basically been approved of by the English crown in the late 1500s by Queen Elizabeth herself, England's greatest monarch, no question about that in my opinion, to basically undermine the Spanish control. And because of this, Francis Drake was known as a privateer and a pirate who helped destroy the Spanish Armada, and he also took Jamaica. That's why Jamaicans speak English and not just Spanish. So basically, that's what you basically need to know about it. I don't know a huge amount about it. I know a little bit about the story of Edward Teach. I've done a video about Edward Teach, aka Blackbeard, who basically went rogue and then tried to surrender, but it was too late, and Robert Maynard boarded his ship and killed him. The Queen Anne's Revenge in 1718 off the coast of Carolina. So most of the piracy that you think about when you think of Pirates of the Caribbean is happening in the Florida Keys, the eastern Atlantic seaboard, where the United States is now, as well as, of course, around Cuba and Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti, Puerto Rico, because that's where the British were doing their best to undermine the Spanish, and eventually the British found their own captains going rogue themselves. So that's a little bit there, Seth. If you like what you just heard, if you're enjoying what I'm talking about, please be sure to like and subscribe. Show some love to my wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny. Best moderator on YouTube by far. Yes. Thank you, Uncle Pierre. I will take that in the spirit it is given. Speaking of piracy, Somali pirates took control of a Chinese naval ship. I heard about that. And I also heard that there's a recognition of Somali land and semaphore by the Trump administration. That's going to be interesting. Go ask Benin for reparations. I don't want reparations. I don't want any reparations. So you support to gay and trans. What does that mean? I'm just saying what cultural Marxist reinterpretations and dialectics applied in certain contexts do, and how that is the branch that woke ideology springs from, and that is the involvement and the greater voicing of gay and trans perspectives in history, to recognize that there were trans people and gay people in history. You can't get away from it. Obviously, perhaps not to the significant percentage that we see today, but I wouldn't say that's only because they were repressed. I would think that that's one theory, but another theory is, obviously, I think it's become more in vogue and popular to be that, especially at a young age. So, Andrew, that's, what do I mean? I support all people, and I support them, especially if they come here and like and subscribe. And I have people who come on this channel and who are of different sexual orientations, and I'm just happy that they're here learning about history, and I'm just so glad to have them here. Hello, I've always wondered, why did Bush evacuate Saudi family from the U.S. the day after 9/11 when the airspace was closed? I read this in a book called House of Bush, House of Saudi, thanks. I think because they felt there would be more strikes. There was the worry about the anthrax breakout in late 2001, early 2002. But I love music. First of all, great to see you again. The basic fear was that the Saudi government might be in danger because most of the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, who slammed into the Twin Towers in New York. So that's what my best guess would be there. Cytonic, bro, I gotta say, you look like the type of guy to use powdered soap. Yeah, whatever. Hilarious. Wow, a gay joke. Amazing. I mean, the government and corporations are messing with our reservation, not so much for the white man. They usually just help out or use services to get themselves richer, like Eileen Pinion. And I agree with that to some extent, because if you look at the history specifically, the fighting between Native Americans and whites was usually them against the government. It was not between the settlers. There were plenty of settlers who may have stayed away from the natives but didn't have much to do with them, and there were sometimes fights and skirmishes, but the bulk of fighting, the bulk of dispossession, the bulk of killing occurred between the U.S. government and the military, which after Custer's last stand, Little Bighorn in 1876, chose to go on a rampage and destroy the Sioux Nation. That's the most infamous example, Wounded Knee in 1891, where they slaughtered men, women, and children of the Sioux Nation, which is a series of different tribes in the Pacific Northwest and the Plains area, the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming. The truth of the matter is that those that wasn't the reflection and the perspectives of the pioneers, settlers, fur trappers, or traders that had come decades before and set up lives. In fact, many of them had built some sort of relationship with the natives because they needed their expertise for survival and trade, much like the Pilgrims did at Plymouth. And if you want to learn more about that, please watch my live stream and videos about the history of Thanksgiving. Let me see. He doesn't give out his personal opinions or political views. However, he is clearly an intelligent, empathetic person. Thank you, Simon. I appreciate you saying that. Under Trump, this understanding of be who you are, be who you want to be are probably gone. I don't know. We'll see. Tanuki, your guess is as good as mine. Trump is an interesting character when it comes to those issues because Trump has been pretty radically anti-transgender agenda, but he has also been welcoming of LGBTQ persons and people in those positions. Especially in his first administration, he was far more open to it than previous Republican presidents. He's the first Republican president elected after Obergefell made gay marriage a constitutional precedent. So I don't know what to say there. I support both as well, if anyone cares for my opinion. Yes, I love your opinion, Simon, and I agree with it. I want to see what happened to Hitler. So typical, Hitler committed suicide. That's the official story. April 30th, 1945. He took a cyanide tablet with his longtime mistress, who he had just married, Eva Braun, and then before he could be killed by the Allies, he shot himself in the head. Something that he believed, in the spirit of invoking the Romans, because he loved the Roman Empire, he believed was far more noble, was to commit suicide. That's why he allowed Rommel to commit suicide rather than executing him for trying to kill him. So Hitler, there's rumors, there's speculation. I don't buy any of it about Hitler going to Antarctica. That's just absurd. Or Hitler going to South America. It is true that many Nazis escaped. And here's why I don't believe it. The Mossad and the Knesset did everything in their power with the help of the U.S. and the international community and the UN to hunt down Adolf Eichmann. They didn't get Mengele, but if they could get Eichmann, that Adolf, why couldn't they get Adolf Hitler? That would have been the big one on their target. They wouldn't have said anything, but they would have found him and killed him. And who knows, maybe they did, but the idea that he lived a full life in South America is balderdash, in my opinion. So, I'm reading yours, Carter. It's great to see you. Who is the most capitalist president? I'd say Calvin Coolidge, Reagan, and Trump. Yep. Boeing, be ready to defend. I appreciate your efforts. You can utilize guerrilla warfare the same way the Vietnamese did against both the French and the Americans. So, yes, Carter, I am reading. If you're still here, I hope you're enjoying this. Like and subscribe. Be as radical as you want. Just be ready to defend it. Is systematic racism real? I think that's almost too political and social for my opinion on that matter. I think there is obviously evidence historically of systematic injustices in the United States, but I think there is a lot of healing that the U.S. has done and needs to do, and that's basically all I'm going to say about that. Did Hitler have children? What has been the fate of descendants? Yes, Hitler had children. One of his grandchildren was convicted of the R word, if I'm correct, of a child. Yeah. Hello, Bozedes. Good to see you. We're trying to catch up on the chat. No one is peeking in my window behind me, but nice try catch all. A lot of people love Reagan. I understand that. Luis, this is a great question. Are we using imaginary money? To some extent, yes, because the U.S. dollar doesn't have a standard. Paper money was created by the Song dynasty in China in the 11th century as a way to not run out of copper coins and have to devalue their currency, which the Romans had done. So they started handing out banknotes so they wouldn't run out of copper in their mines. And so the banknotes represented the copper currency, so it was based on the standard value of copper. Gold and silver were the common standards for England and France and the United States. And more, the standard has become the U.S. dollar, sits on top of the U.S. dollar. So make with that what you will. What is the difference between early stage capitalism and late stage capitalism? I don't know. I think what you're referring to, are you referring to Smith versus modern, like thinkers like Hayek and Friedman? Or are you referring to the development of capitalism parallel to Marxist socialist revolution compared to the workers' paradise? You said Saddam was a nice guy. I didn't say Saddam was a nice guy. I said these guys were not nice guys. I'm saying the alternative could be easier. Catholicism is a sham and a shame. That's nice. I don't agree. Whatever. I do my best, Vicente. If you are liking what you're hearing, like and subscribe, join the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. Ryan, it's always great to see you. You are never too late. And Remnant, I do agree. There are too many isms. There, I agree with you. Nicholas, good question. Do you find direct democracy better than representative democracy? Theoretically, yes, but I just think that direct democracy is too much the people's will, and I think there are certain blockers put in there with representative democracy and constitutional republic, and I think the American system has been the most successful democracy because it is shrouded in that Republican with a small r virtue. If you want to learn more about republicanism versus democracy, come back for the live stream tomorrow where I talk about the founding of republicanism in ancient Rome. But yeah, Nicholas, that's my best answer. First time on the channel. I'm so glad you're joining us from Texas. Yeah. I hope I'm saying that right. Interesting. I'm so glad you're enjoying the internet, and I hope you're enjoying the games too, and us. Mr. Lewis, I'm sure you are a great history buff, and I'm glad to have you aboard. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Why was Andrew Jackson such a bad president? I already answered that, but great question. Who was the worst president in American history? I ate my monitor. I think most historians would agree that James Buchanan is up there. William Henry Harrison was only president for a month because he gave a stupid address that was way too long and got sick from pneumonia because he was trying to prove that he wasn't too old. Then he got sick from pneumonia and died. Womp, womp, womp. I think I've got videos about that. I think just because I think a president is overrated doesn't think I think he's the worst. So I think FDR, Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson are overrated presidents. But I don't think that they are. I think Ulysses S. Grant is overrated. I don't think that they are necessarily bad presidents. I just don't think they're excellent presidents and they're marquees like people like to make them out. Grant is beloved because of his contributions in the Civil War, not because he did a good job as president. And same thing with FDR. His speeches, his ability to guide the nation through World War II was impressive. That doesn't take away from his racism and his economic failures. And you look at Andrew Jackson, his bravery, bravado, and American spirit, and the creation of a manifest destiny basically in his administration, inspiring and interesting. He's part of the American story. I think he should come off a $20 bill, and Harriet Tubman should replace him. But that's because Harriet Tubman was doing everything she could to help blacks escape slavery, and he did nothing. So, just my opinion. Doing my best to give as many facts as possible. Who do I think is the worst? James Buchanan basically caused the Civil War through his inaction, tried to force pro-slavery constitutions in territories, even though he was against slavery himself. William Henry Harrison, only president for a month, really didn't do anything because he was inept. Martin Van Buren bungled the first economic recession. Richard Nixon, I wouldn't put quite there because he was actually very successful administratively, but he was terrible when it came to corruption and handling scandals and being honest with the American people, so he's hated. By that same token, despite his own successes, Bill Clinton probably deserves a little bit more of aspersion than he gets. And I think a lot of people forget that because Clinton was acquitted and not impeached and not convicted. Nixon didn't even wait. He just got out of Dodge. Who else do I not think is particularly that great? Yeah, there's a lot. Most of the presidents who were killed, or several of them or died in office, were pretty incompetent and short-lived. So people like Warren Harding and James Garfield. So, yeah. How about the Dutch in South America? Are you referring to Guyana, which the British, I think, took from them just like they took New York? I don't know an awful lot about the Dutch in South America. I know about them in South Africa, and they're fighting with the British in the Boer Wars, where you first used concentration camps, by the way. But if you're enjoying what we're talking about, hello, Blue Tiger, be sure to like and subscribe. We're 3/4 of the way through. This is just going fast. I'm doing my absolute best to catch up as much as I can. Chat about Somalia. I don't know a huge amount about Somalia. Lizobani, I am assuming you're of Cuban descent. Bienvenidos. But basically, Cuba, I don't know a huge amount of Cuba's early middle history. I know a huge amount about three different events. One, the Columbus sailed to Cuba, I think during his first voyage, and settled it for Spain. And it was huge because of sugar and tobacco. Rather than finding gold and the city of gold like El Dorado, they found these cash crops that were cash cows that they could use instead. At the same time, that led to the enslavement of the native peoples and things like that. So there were sugar plantations and stuff after the natives died off due to exposure to disease, a common theme in North and South American history when it comes to European colonization. African slaves were brought instead, so there's a lot of Africans who were enslaved who intermarried, becoming mulattoes with the native peoples. And a mulatto is somebody who is African mixed with Latin blood and Indian blood and all of that. And a mestizo is an Indian or native mixed with the blood of a native Spanish person, a European. So mestizo means mixed. I don't know what mulatto means. But yes, Benny, that's the first phase. The second one is the United States freeing Cuba, basically to make it its own cash cow for tobacco and sugar during the Spanish-American War in the 1898, liberating Cuba from the Spanish, basically to give it its independence a few years later, but to extract as much wealth and influence as it possibly can in that region. And obviously the third part is Fulgencio Batista, the leader of Cuba during the 1950s, who was trying to bring about economic recovery and had promised to give up power if he was duly unelected. People did not trust him. He had acted like a dictator in the past. He didn't seem trustworthy. That led to several revolts, and obviously the most violent and effective and relentless was Castro's revolt, which created the first communist state in Latin America with Castro and his right-hand man, Che Guevara. So just a little bit about Cuba there. I love Cuba. It's beautiful, gorgeous country, and President Kennedy, by the way, just like me, a cigar lover, got about 1,000 Cuban cigars right before he put in the embargoes, just so he could smoke them because he loved them so much. Levi, hi, great to see you. How did Central America become independent? Simón Bolívar, that's the two-word answer. The independence leader, I mentioned Portugal's independence move, Brazil from Portugal, but Simón Bolívar obviously gets the country of Bolivia named after him. Mexico, their independence movement was started by a priest. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who started it in Argentina. He was a Spanish general who turned rogue. Yeah, stuff like that. What good things did Woodrow Wilson do? Woodrow Wilson set up an international system of self-democratization where basically the United States officially declared that it was involved in foreign affairs in the rest of the world, and it would try to bring democracy and allow democracy in as many places as possible. He guided the United States very well through World War I. He brought the United States to the brink of being a superpower greater than the British Empire. And the U.S. helped the Allies overwhelm the Central Powers, Germany and Austria-Hungary, and win the war, which, by the way, I think is World War II, but that's another story. So let's see here. Going through the chat. Great questions, guys. I really appreciate that. Where am I from? The United States. I don't get into too many details. Thank you, Texas. I really appreciate that. Yeah, can you back up further with pirates, the Moors? The Barbary pirates you're talking about in Spain and North Africa. I talked about them yesterday in the live stream where they enslaved large amounts of white ship sailors who was called impressment. You would take people from your ship, put them on your ship, and basically make them do what you said. What effect did the War of 1812 have on Britain? Not much. Britain won the War of 1812. It's the only war up till Vietnam America lost. And basically, Britain just decided to leave America alone and just stop fighting because they wanted to deal with the bigger enchilada, which was Napoleon. They were fighting in India, Europe, and the United States. So their effort in the War of 1812 was kind of half-butted, but they did manage to defeat the Americans pretty convincingly. So, okay, I can't take compliments. Talk about Cuban history a little bit. Got to it. I hope you're still here, Lou. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best to get through these as fast as possible. Yes, there definitely are. Pablo Escobar, the Colombian drug king who was killed by the United States and Colombia working together. No, Texas, that's not fully true. Cuban history in the last 70 years is communist, but not recently, 65 years. Hello, Fazio. Great to see you. It's my pleasure, Janet. If you enjoy it, like and subscribe. Tell all your friends and family. Join us for the live stream lecture tomorrow where I talk about the Roman Republic. Come back next Friday. Start your weekend off with some friendly neighborhood history, my first part of the Q&A, and the second part on Saturday. Next Sunday, I'm going to be talking about Christmas stuff. So, Hello, good to see you. Where's your money? I don't know. Where's my money? Subscribe so I can get monetized. I'm a part of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. That's amazing. So a lot of people think of the Sioux and they think of one tribe, but like the Iroquois, so many people don't understand that Native Americans are as diverse, if not more so, than Europeans, and probably as diverse as Africans, really. And the Native Americans, each nation had like 5 or 6 different tribes that would unite. Iroquois, Sioux, and these tribes would enslave or conquer other tribes and or make peace treaties with them and work together to defend their lands from other natives and from white settlers. And interestingly enough, when the Pilgrims were at Plymouth, not Jamestown, Massasoit and the Wampanoag allied with them to use them against their enemy, the Massachusetts tribe, which is where we get the name of the state, Massachusetts. Jimenez, hello, welcome. In fact, many American states are named after native tribes. Mississippi, Dakota, Illinois, the Chicago tribe. The Dutch named the Dutch, when they founded New Amsterdam, encountered the tribe that lived on the main island called the Manhattan. So, interestingly enough, if there wasn't any disease, could the Native Americans have repelled the Europeans? Yes, and they did. Probably the best example of this was what happened at Roanoke, where they were probably killed off by Powhatan and his people, or the Powhatan people. Thoughts on tobacco as integral to United States history? Guillaume, that's a great answer, a great question. So I talked about Cuban cigars a minute ago. Obviously, the cash crop of tobacco is popular in southern states. It funds and is a big keystone next to, obviously, the biggest one, which is cotton. But it's a big keystone to plantations, particularly in those middle colonies. It perpetuates the slave trade. It perpetuates slavery and the tensions over that. Cigars were the most popular thing to get, very popular in Florida, where they grew a lot of them in the Florida Keys, and their economy actually collapsed in the 1910s because after World War I, everybody started smoking cigarettes because they were cheaper. And those are the cigarettes you've seen with the long holder and all of that stuff. So basically, tobacco is very important in American history, and obviously during the 40s and 50s, throughout the culture, people smoke cigarettes. Everybody smoked cigarettes. You could watch them and they would be smoking cigarettes. And there is still an American mystique thanks to the commercialism around Marlboro. You had Yul Brynner, the famous actor, being the Marlboro Man, this cowboy who's cool and going to go fight off the bad guys, and he's smoking a cigarette, so you should too. Marlboro, Camel, all of these brands used government research to prove that smoking tobacco doesn't cause cancer. My great uncle was a research physician for them who helped them prove in the early 60s cigarettes don't cause cancer. And obviously that's not true. And obviously the backlash against tobacco has led to the rise of marijuana as an alternative and of vaping, which is a worse alternative than cigarettes. But yeah, cigars and pipes tend to be more niche. Cigarette smoking is still extremely popular. And I think that's because that mystique from the Marlboro Man, from Camel, from all of that still stays because of the advertising of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. These people are brand spanking new to televisions. Their children are brand spanking new. You see somebody smoking, they're cool. Every actor and actress is smoking. The greatest figure of that era, Frank Sinatra, is a reliable cigarette smoker. People aren't smoking cigars anymore. They're just a big cigarette, basically, and people don't know the differences. But I mean, so cigarettes very popular because of the commercialism surrounding them. How come the Darien Strait hasn't been conquered yet? Why is there such a gap? Because the South American countries have made an agreement with Mexico to send as many people as they can. Mexico is now telling them to stop, and the president of Panama also wants it to stop because he's at that influx between South America and Central America. So that's so interesting. I didn't know that. I thought he was just a coward. I don't know who you're referring to. The Boys from Brazil, very interesting movie. Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier. Is there any chance Michelle Obama is really a dude in those two children? No. No, I'm not mad at you, Fidel, for asking that, but no. Stop it with the memes. I've heard the jokes. It's a right-wing hoax. Russia have remains? Sure do. Let me see here. Excuse me. Excuse me. Did Nolan Ryan really throw 110 mile? I don't know. I like baseball. I don't know enough about its history. I need to watch Ken Burns' documentary series. Watch some history documentaries this weekend. That's my prescription to you. Good evening. Who do you think will win next Friday's football game, Notre Dame or Indiana? I'm going to always pick the Fighting Irish. I don't know what you're saying. Medine, I believe you're speaking French. Vous faites quoi? Not sure what you mean. The United States didn't invent slavery. Yes, that's true. Do you speak Russian? Niet. Very, very, very little. I need to learn that for my dissertation. I can talk about his important historical divorces. Let me see. Saddam dated Satan. Yeah. Not everyone reads the Bible, Simon. The gold standard was switched to the oil standard. Yeah. That's an interesting point. I think I agree with you to some extent. Let me see here. Direct democracy group mentality is strong. Hello from UK. Do you think that the church fathers pillaged from the ancient texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh, etc.? No. The Epic of Gilgamesh, which has the story of a flood and the creation of humanity similar to the Garden of Eden and Noah's story in the Bible, those stories in the Bible were written anywhere between 1500 BC and 500 BC by Jews. 500 years at the very least before Jesus of Nazareth and his followers. What will be the eventual definition of the Biden doctrine? Thanks. A kind of a return to Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama. I think there's two competing foreign policy views in America right now, and this has been playing out in history since World War II. One is the intervention because if we just intervene and show them how good we are, they'll eventually behave like us. That's what Carter did with Iran. That's what Biden has done with Syria and with Iran, and Obama did that also with Iran. And I think the other is they are not going to change. Screw them, and that's becoming more so. There's been the interventionists to make them like us. There's been the intervention to make them see how good we are, and now there's the other isolationist side that's basically fed up with it. They don't think it's working. Yeah. Did tobacco's wife really exist during colonization? I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean. GTA 5. Thank you, Joe. GTA 5. I'm not a Fortnite player. I'm more of a Fortnite listener. Shout out to Taylor Swift, who just celebrated her 35th birthday, by the way. My name is Kotsya. I'm from Russia, Siberia. Well, so great to see you. I'm so glad you're here. From Russia, with love. If you could choose to be the president at any point in American history, what time would you choose and why? Roaring 20s. Easy. Problems obviously going on under the seams that we don't know about, but such an exciting time of invention, discovery, and economic wealth. It's easy to be Coolidge or Harding. They make it look easy. George W. Bush didn't help it, to say the least. Let me see here. Thank you for your answer. My pleasure. Should be Columbus Day or Native American Day. Talked about this in a video. Talked about this on a live stream. I ate my monitor. Please go check those out. A full-length video and a live stream. I think Columbus Day should stick, and I think Native Americans should get another month in addition to November to celebrate their culture. Giving them the former holiday of their colonizer doesn't make any sense to me, because the Indigenous Peoples Day is too patronizing. Which European empire treated the Native Americans the best? The French, easily. The French were only interested in conversion and trade, not really an impressment in slavery. Always enjoy these shows. Thank you for helping him out. Simon's amazing. We love Simon. Is native history really known? To some extent it is, but it's more based, it's like Mesopotamian and Egyptian. There is some writing, but it's more based on understandings of culture, traveling. These people were very itinerant. So the way we understand early civilizations is similar to the way we should understand the Native Americans, especially in North America. Central America, you have more structure. The Iroquois Nation in New York, upstate New York, you have more structure, stuff like that. Global, that's a great question. So great to see you as always. So SFG, hello, welcome. Bolivar, also Venezuela. He freed Venezuela and became Bolivar. Yep, that's true. The New Deal. Texas Repo, the New Deal was FDR's Achilles heel. Did not solve the Great Depression and is probably responsible for its prolongment. I wouldn't say I know that for sure, but it was not. It made people feel good about themselves. It created certain economic safety nets that America probably needed, but it did not directly solve the Great Depression. Roosevelt relying on the military-industrial complex to basically create itself, and for Ford and and GM and Chevy and all these other companies to basically lionize production so that we could outproduce both the Germans and the Japanese, which is how we defeated them in the Second World War. That is how the United States got out of the Great Depression. You draft everybody and everybody else goes to a factory. Total war, no unemployment. There was no unemployment in Nazi Germany. There was no unemployment in Soviet Russia during the Second World War. Bunnies are cool. Indeed they are, especially Simon the Bunny. Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. How do I know this? Reading, writing, watching stuff, learning, discussing with people, trying to fit it all in between my ears. I have a master's and the doctorate is on the way. That's my next goal. Know about the Civil War in El Salvador. A little bit. I don't know which one. I'm sorry, there have been a few. I think you're referring to, or that's Nicaragua. I'm thinking of the Sandinistas and the Iran-Contra affair. I know there was a civil war, I think in the 70s, and there were a lot of immigrants. I've known people who were immigrants from El Salvador to the United States. I would love to go to Turkey. Turkey's an incredible place, this crossroads, all that history between the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, the modern Turks, Islam, Christianity, Istanbul, the Hagia Sophia. It's just an incredible country. And the coffee is so strong, it sticks to your teeth, and I like coffee, so I want that. Why did the Texas Republic collapse? It didn't collapse. The Texas Republic was set up to wait till the United States was ready to annex it. Van Buren and Harrison didn't want to do it. Tyler did it at the end of his presidency. Thank you for your explanation. Greetings from Miami and a Cuban American. Well, I love Cuban food. I love Cuban culture. I love Cuban music. Cuba has gone through a lot of hard times. It's you could argue that its stability has been questionable for 500 years, but it's so beautiful there. Technically, isn't he just repeating what he heard, read? Yeah, to some extent I am. I'm adding my own nuanced flair and opinion based off of my findings, but join the Legion. Yep. 6,000 is the goal. Please like and subscribe. Tell all your friends and family. Come back for the live stream lecture. We're at an hour, but I feel like keeping on. Why don't Europeans like Americans? Because the Americans have kind of try to Americanize. Every powerful country tries to make the countries that they have influence over like themselves. The Greeks did it. The Romans did it. It's nothing new. There is nothing I would want to say there's almost nothing inherently wrong with it, but the U.S. modeling Europe, particularly Western Europe, after itself in the hunt to take down communism created a lot of bitterness in the 1950s and 60s. But yes, a lot of Europeans, like my wonderful moderator, love America and its history. Natives did use tobacco and ayahuasca and mushrooms and all sorts of stuff. Like these brands. I'm like your brand. I heard tobacco itself is not bad for your health. It's the other, yeah, it's nicotine, tobacco. So that's why I'm okay with smoking cigars. Because it's first of all, it sits in your mouth and you release it. You don't let it go into your lungs, which destroys your breathing. So doctors endorse brand. There was television ads with doctors saying, "Hey, smoking's okay. This and that." Global. That's an interesting point. We'll see if that's true or not. People have always referred to the continent as different Europeans to us. If we visit France or Spain, yeah, and the British have always been in this liminal place where they aren't European and they like the Europeans to do their own thing while they leave them alone. There's not that huge devotion of the British to Europeanness, despite the fact you can't have European history without Britain. Battle of the Bulge failed. It failed because, I love this story, it's a bulge because they pushed into Belgium and attacked the Americans at the Bastion, and the Germans send a note to the American general and they say, surrender. And he says, they want to surrender to us. It's literally the line from Princess Bride. And the aide says to the general, I forget his name, he says, oh no, they want us to surrender to them. He said, nuts to them, screw them. And then Patton shows up just in time to relieve them. It was a huge counteroffensive by the Germans. It almost worked, but it failed at the last minute. Very close to keeping things going. Yeah, Daniel, I agree. They do smell better. I've heard people say weed smells the best. I don't like the smell of weed. I've never enjoyed the smell of it. So, let me see. Product placement. Yeah, Starbucks. I'm just thirsty and I like coffee. This isn't going to settle my thirst, but I'm have a long night ahead of me. Like I said, go out and party, have a good time, stay safe out there. That's what I'm going to do. Why did George H.W. Bush lose in 88? Huh? He won in 88. He was going to lose, and then Dukakis made a fool out of himself by standing on a tank. I like this channel much better than the other live channels. Do my best. I so appreciate that. Can Tham. 92. Oh, Ross Perot had a grudge, went after him. Too liberal for a Republican. Perot, basically the founder of modern libertarian thought to some extent, along with Ron Paul. And conservative Republicans, people I know who had voted for Bush and Reagan twice, voted for Perot because he was talking about fiscal responsibility, libertarian economics, what Javier Milei is doing in Brazil, and they felt that Bush had betrayed conservative Republicans, and especially by raising taxes. So, yeah, it's as perfect as it can get. We're doing the best we can. We're on our way to 5,700. I love it. Thank you, Simon, for keeping track. What did the history books get wrong? Oh, where do I start? Yeah. Smile, the truth. That's what they got. That's partly true. History is written by the victors. And those are our live streams. Please come and join us. I'm going to pin that message in the chat so you guys can see when they are, because I would love to see you guys. And we've almost caught up, Simon. I love this. What did the history books get wrong? I already answered that. And look forward to the live stream lecture where I discuss the Roman Republic and its history. The 1970s, period of a lot of political and global instability, both in the Soviet Union and the United States, as well as the Middle East. You have the collapse of the Shah, you have the energy crisis, OPEC raising prices, energy rationing, and you have Europe in terrorist attacks in Ireland. The IRA is at its height at that time. Italy is having problems, and of course the Munich Olympics, where the Palestinians capture and kill Israeli athletes in 1972. You're on the plane. Wow, I'm so glad you're listening on the plane. Hi, Joker. Turkish coffee's amazing. What's up? Is this your new channel? Not my new one. I've had it for a while. We've been going since February. My girlfriend suggested to me, she said, I was trying to list all the kings and queens of England to her, and she didn't want to hear it. Or maybe she did, I don't know. And she said, you should share this knowledge with the rest of the world because and I was like, well, I'm just kind of doing this for you because I love you and I don't love everybody else. And eventually I was like, well, what the heck's going to happen? What's the worst that could happen? Took the dogs out for a walk. You can go back and look at it. It's the first video ever on the channel, and it's obviously bumpy and terrible because I'm walking dogs and it's rainy, and I don't know anything about graphics, green screens, 15 seconds, 16 seconds. I just did it to just put up a short, and I just talked about the fall of Rome and the lost cause theory in the Civil War. The next morning, I'm stunned to find out that one of my videos got 400 views. And I wake her up, shaking her, and I'm yelling, 400 views, 400 views. I didn't know that one of my videos would get more than 500,000. So I've been just amazed. We've gotten more than 2 million views on this channel in live streams, short videos, and live. And then the live streams started back in May and June, and we just piled those on. And as time went on, we were only doing Saturday afternoons, and then people were like, hey, you need to do this on 2 days a week. So I did Saturday, Sunday, and then a couple months ago decided to shift to Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday's the live stream lecture, because all the topics I would want to discuss during the Q&A, we could never get to because of people like you and all of your great questions. So that is a little history on the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So let me see here. We've been here for 10 months, and we've gotten almost 6,000 subscribers. So I'm just floored and amazed by how loving and amazing the YouTube community has been. There's trolls, there's jerks. Haters gonna hate, and I'm just gonna shake. In your opinion, what decade was the greatest for the average American and why? 50s. America is at its wealthiest, and the threat of nuclear war has been highly overblown. I don't think it was really, it was obviously a threat and people were worried about it, but the likelihood of it, as Eisenhower knew, was low. Well, Fidel, if you are asking the question in the future, it is obviously going to be this next, yeah. Civil War, there was a lot of happy people, maybe 1890. The 1890s are pretty good, but you've got a lot of economic disparity. You have a lot of lack of safety, social safety nets. You don't have a huge amount of technology. You have immigrants living in horrible conditions in the cities. You have huge amounts of discrimination. You still have that to some extent in the 50s, but things are getting stabler. And people are doing everything they can to combat racism, and that's when you really start to see it move forward after World War II. What state am I in? Not the state of denial. Will you vote for me? I'm running for president by 2028. No, because you're going to be in prison by 2028 if you are who your screen name says you are. Is Trump really a populist? He is a right-wing populist with conservative tendencies. Yeah, free mocha latte. Yes, get it free. Starbucks, all the red cups that everybody hates for some reason that I don't really care. Yeah. Anyways, let's see. We've got some messages that were retracted, and we're near the end of the chat, so I want to see what these said. Am I trans? No. Yes, she's very smart. Very, very smart person. When will Americans choose a woman female president? Give us your best decades guess. Will your future generations likely be less patriarchal? Will it a white European U.S. non-male? Yeah, I don't think that Kamala Harris losing had anything to do with her being a non-white woman. I think that in the country that elected Obama twice and has obviously embraced this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, sometimes to its benefit and sometimes to its hindrance, as we embrace any ideology, I don't think that's why she lost. I think she lost because she replaced Biden too late. I think she lost because she didn't come across to average everyday Americans as likable or interesting. I think there was a level of a limousine liberal in her that has been a criticism of liberals for a long time, the Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer's of the world, and maybe even Obama a little bit. And I don't think people knew her well enough. And I think that she was also something that nobody talks about for some reason. She's the most liberal candidate in American presidential history by far. When I was a kid and Obama ran, everybody was running and screaming that Obama was the most liberal. He was a Marxist and all of this nonsense. But he was at that point the most far left presidential candidate in American history, which if you compare it to Europe is center left at best. And you see Kamala Harris, I think it's the same thing for her. I think she is more to the left of Obama, but nobody said anything. Nobody talked about her and Walz and how liberal they actually were compared to previous Democrats like Biden, who was substantially more conservative than her and even more conservative than Obama. So I think that she lost because of those things. I think she just didn't have the appeal, the ground game, or the timing. And I think that the replacement of Joe Biden in July has scarred the Democratic Party. And if they had just said to us, he's old, we're sorry we didn't say it, he's clearly in decline, we've been covering it up because we want him to win, we hate Trump that much, or we dislike Trump, or we really are scared of his policies, and if you're scared, you should vote for Kamala Harris. We get where you're coming from. But to pretend that everything was fine and this was business as usual, and to be cheering Joe Biden when it's clear that he has been taken out of the equation after 50 years in power, to some extent or another, as senator and vice president, and now president, that didn't make any sense to a lot of people. And I was sitting there saying, that doesn't happen that often. And so I think that the fact that the Democrats weren't willing to own what had happened hurt them. The unwillingness to own something in politics always catches up. Nixon could have survived Watergate if he had just said, I'm at fault, I was wrong, it was stupid. He probably could have survived it. Clinton admitted at the last minute, and that saved him. Harris and Biden should have said, this is what happened, we're sorry, but we're not going to pretend that this isn't strange or awkward, but we need you to rally around this unity that we need to create because we need to stop Trump. And I also think to some extent the Trump is this or that. It was always Trump is bad, Trump is this, Trump is that, and he might be, but there wasn't a lot of who Kamala Harris was, at least from what I saw. So I think that's from a strategic and as objective as a potential as possibility. They could not win against Trump, who was the most popular and renegade of his political career with RFK, Elon Musk, and the felony charges, making him more of a, may I say, badass than he had been in previous elections, as on top of his usual rhetoric and abrasiveness. So I think that really hurt the Democrats. But I think that America is ready for a female president. I think that if there is a female candidate nominated, regardless of her color or sexual identity, and she is substantially supported by the party, and she has all the right ground game, and she has the popularity going and the likability and the appeal, she could easily win regardless of her color, and it would be a cherry on top, whatever, if she is not white in a white majority country. You can't find white people who have been presidents in Kenya. You just can't. But you can find that in the United States, and that's that diversity that I think makes woke ideology popular in some ways. So that's my opinion and perspective there. I think it might be her. She could polish up and come back in 4 years and win. That's what I think the Democrats are going to try to do. I have no idea. I have no crystal ball. I'm a historian. But as somebody who has studied U.S. elections and politics, in addition to history, that's what I think happened. So I Love Music. It's a great question about why are we not ready for a female president in the United States? I think we are. I just think it has to be a different circumstance. Why do Americans lose their original mother tongue and their culture after a while? Why don't Americans speak more German? Assimilation, immigrants becoming more part of the American system, stuff like that. Yes, he is great. He did the greatest decade of, I would say, the 50s, yes. Who did I vote for? I voted for Donald Harris. Oh, sorry, Kamala Trump. I don't share my political views. I'm here as a historian to give as an objective as possible an opinion. And yes, politics can't please, you can't please anyone in politics. Yeah. Democrats ruin this country. Yeah, whatever. Eggnog. We are live comments. We're almost there. Democrats are the problem. DEI is trash and make America great again. Thank you, Joshua, for telling us who you voted for. We're almost there. Trump all the way. Yeah. Questions about history. I appreciate the political banter, but questions about history, please. Give one word to describe the Obama presidency. Unfulfilled. I think that, and I think he knows it more than, as someone who really respects his candor, his ability to speak, and his ability to unite people, and was very impressed with him throughout his presidency. I must say that I think that he was unfulfilled. I think he thought he would be a transformational Lincoln-esque FDR or JFK-like figure, but I don't think he got there. And I think that he had problems, and I think that's created a level of frustration in him. And I think you can see it the way he talks now. And the fact that Trump got elected after him makes it even worse. So, yeah, Trump train. Yeah, we're turning into a MAGA group here. Let me see. Trump 2024. I'm going, should I stop by McDonald's and get a cheeseburger? Only if you want RFK to disapprove of you, James Kinley. The press speaker walks out when she gets asked a hard question. Yeah, she's not the best. No doubt about it. I don't even think the Democrats would like that. The poor man should have been protected from public scrutiny and ridicule by removing him from public life quite some time ago. Possible. I don't know. I think he wanted to be president, if we're talking about Biden. Yeah. Let me see here. I'm going home. Let me see. Did I get everybody? Have I caught up all the way? I want to get through everything. Vegan special. Women are not competent. Pointless. It's bull. Democrats are a joke. Big Mac or McRib. Big Mac. Let me see here. Good point, bud. Kenya is predominantly black. Yes, Kenya is predominantly black, and America is predominantly white. That's my point. Yeah, let me see. Bunch of woke idiots. Yeah. I don't want to hear about the politics, guys. I'm not trying to... I love how people type stuff that he isn't going to understand the context of what you were talking. I'm trying to. We will have a female president. We will have one in the next decade. That's my prediction. Let me see. There should be a woman president, like it says in the Bible. Yes, William, the Bible is not talking about, in that context, women in power. There are women in power all throughout the Old and New Testament. Sorry. Okay. I'm totally biased. Sorry, I'm totally biased. Once again, we've reached that moment, Simon. I've been called. The opposition hates me or whoever. Someone on the left hates me. They think I'm right wing. Someone on the right hates me. They think I'm left wing. It's a compliment. Yep. Thank you, Frederick. I'm glad your friend is wondering what I did. If a woman becomes president, we might as well say hello. No, I do not think that for a second. Did Britain have a world war under Margaret Thatcher? Did Indira Gandhi ruin India? Did Bhutta Benazir destroy Pakistan? Did Catherine the Great make Russia more powerful or less powerful? Women belong in power and can do power. They can run countries, and they've done it perfectly well throughout human history. Which is why you should watch my series on powerful female rulers. You know how dangerous it is that you are entertaining a female president. That's just blatant sexism at that point. Thanks for your insightful answers. There is for the future. Why is the white population in the U.S. decreasing? Birth rates and native population birth rates always decrease faster than minority population birth rates. Look at what's happening in Japan and South Korea. It's much worse. Let me see here. We love aliens. We love talking about it. I've done talks about UFOs and stuff. I'm really enjoying that. Thank you for listening from India, Gagan. I really appreciate that. You know how great Indira Gandhi was. Women are the only competent to be mothers and raise children. Yes, the 14th century called. They would like their sexism back. America is the source of the Freemasons. Partially, yes. And me thinking if they're and Palestine is the source of ISIS, or sorry, Palestine is the source of Hamas. Which one's more dangerous? My thinking is if there would ever be a Native American Indian president, I'll be the very first to vote. That's great. I would be very happy to vote for someone of diverse background to become president. We need that. India was already having problems long before she became the prime minister. Let's see. I'm just reading the comments. If you guys are just joining us, we're talking about female leaders. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, our live Q&A. We're going over again tonight because we got so many great questions. I'm trying to catch up. Sorry, I missed it. Why did civil war break out in El Salvador? I visited a few months ago, and it's so beautiful. I'm trying to remember the reason it did. I don't know. I think it was political instability, probably caused by the United States, the CIA fearing a communist government taking over and destroying it in the middle of a Cold War. Both sides did this to each other. The United States did it all throughout Central and South America during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's very, very sad. Let me see. I watch aliens and UFO stuff every day. So right on. So do I. X-Files, one of my favorite shows. Americans are their own species. The left would nuke all of the earth before they would Putin or someone else embarrass their first. Americans are their own species. I agree with you there. What was the most important election in U.S. history? It might be this one. We always hear it. This is the most important election in our history. I think 1860. Lincoln has to take control at that point. 3/4 Cherokee. Amazing. Narrator Modi. Yep, I've talked about him a lot. And trying to change the name of India to Bharat to get them away from the Indus River Valley in Pakistan. Do you know any history of the Hawaiian Islands? King Kamehameha was the power at the same time as George Washington. Yeah, basically the Hawaiian Islands were settled by different Aleutian peoples and Polynesians 1,000 years ago. They, over time, were united into one kingdom by King Kamehameha, and then the U.S. screwed over Lulukalani, and basically a bunch of guys who were trying to sell sugar, made plantations, and then bought all the land, and then made a rule saying only people with land could vote in elections, and they voted to join the United States. I love Hawaii, though. Yeah, Rated, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not a cosmologist. I'm a historian. Wow, from Antarctica. So we've had someone from every continent now. India, Sweden, there's Europe and Asia. South Africa, people from Cuba, El Salvador, Iraq. I love Russia. I love it. And now we have somebody from Antarctica. All seven, definitely the Aussies. Got to give them some love. And yes, please come back for the live stream tomorrow. We're almost done, I think. Hello from Australia. Hope you are having a happy holidays and a merry December. Always stay positive and productive. Achieve your dreams and goals. Much love. Oh, that's so sweet of you, Bounty Hunter. And I hope you are staying cool because I know it's hot down there right now. As for America, its building is on the blood of American Indians. Partly. I would argue if you're going to be that graphic, you could say it's on the death and disease of Native Americans. Yeah, my name. Don't give my name. Even my wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny, does not know my actual name. I'm the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, and you guys, if you like and subscribe, are the Friendly Neighborhood Historians. Yes, that was the main reason for it, Janet. Hello, Case 44. Great to see you. El Salvador is seriously getting their stuff together lately. Yeah. What's his name? He's an interesting guy. I need to read more about him. I've heard conflicting reports from different sources about his. He's very, very fierce and dictatorial, but he has high approval rating and was overwhelmingly reelected with dictator-like numbers, but the election supposedly wasn't rigged. So, yeah, X-Files is my favorite show. I finally found another X-Files fan. There's so many of us. It's just, you can't, Mulder, Scully, Skinner, just stuff, great stuff. How old am I? If only Simon the Bunny knew. I don't even tell my age. The worst and the bloodiest war was the Civil War. Silver? Or civil? In American history, yeah. What do I think about Netanyahu? I think Netanyahu has a different geopolitical perspective than most Israeli prime ministers before him. Most Israeli prime ministers, Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, even Shimon Peres, of course, mentioned Begin, all had this idea that they could create eventually a two-state solution. I think Netanyahu is tired of waiting for this to happen. He's tired of warfare. He thinks that history is only repeating itself in different ways that are hurting Israelis. So he doesn't care. He doesn't think the Palestinians deserve a state, and he wants to obliterate them. I think that's the wrong response. But that's where he's coming from. DeMarcus, I think that part of the reason the U.S. got involved in Puerto Rico was to make it easier to alleviate their suffering under the Spanish. The Spanish were imprisoning, basically building concentration camps in terrible, horrible prisons in the Caribbean. Yep. Let me see. Magi. Native American people murdering each other for thousands of years couldn't invent the wheel, yet people think America owes them. I'm just not even going to respond. Norway, Otak, it's great to see you as always. Please join the Legion. Thank you. Rated. How do you know I'm Swedish? I don't know. I just have Swedish people here all the time. I love Sweden. One of the most powerful European countries in the 1600s. Who was the most conservative president, the most liberal? Right wing, Reagan. Left wing, Obama. From Canada. Love it. Two-part question. Why doesn't the U.S. use their oil reserves instead of importing? And can the U.S. cut off from the world and sustain itself? Yes. Secondly, it could. First, it doesn't do this because of the need to invest in the global economy and strengthen other countries that might have economical collapses that could hurt the United States if we aren't investing in them. There's a globalization motif. The irony is that in the effort to make renewable energy and not drill in the United States or frack, we actually are importing fossil fuels from other countries, which requires the use of fossil fuels to import them, in addition to still using them. So there's always a trade-off. Thank you. I appreciate the love and support. I trust Trump over women any day of the week. I don't know what to think of that. I'm just going to stop reading those comments. What do I think of Putin? I think he's a dictator with a nationalist vision, and I think it's similar to the Middle East. If the United States wants to get rid of him, they can, but what will they replace him with? That's not a country that is made for democracy. What is the most primitive form of modern warfare? Like the tanks that were always breaking down in World War I. Daniel, you're just one after another after another and another. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate everybody who's here. Please like and subscribe. Join the Friendly Neighborhood Historian Army. I don't know if I'm going to catch up to the chat, Simon. I think I'll go 90 minutes, but I know it's getting late over there for you. And I'll make a point. There was a lady running Houston, Texas, and she had the road in Houston, Texas. Yeah, and there was a woman running England in the 1500s, and she destroyed a Navy armada built by a man. History shows that women can and do rule effectively, and women can and do fail miserably. And history shows that men can and do rule effectively, and history shows that men fail miserably as well. Yeah. Thank you, Simon, you're so sweet. I used to work at the carnival guessing people's ages. You never had the makings of a varsity athlete. I did not. That's why I'm a varsity scholar. Are you good enough for heaven? Ever lied or stolen before? Ever cursed? Ever lusted or hated anyone before? Not on this live stream. Is it true? I think, Global, there's some truth to that with Trump. There's a daddy Trump complex. Look at what he played. YMCA. You know, I was jamming out to the Rasputin song, which is one of my favorite songs because it's historically accurate it's a Boney M and a Majestic. And it's talking about the history of Rasputin to a techno dance. And I'm doing this because the YMCA thing has become a cultural phenomenon. But what is the YMCA song about? Young men feeling left out of society. That's why Trump uses it. And that's who he was appealing to, young men who felt left out of society. It was very, very subtle. It wasn't subtle. Nothing Trump really does is subtle, but nobody was paying attention to it because they were just more paying attention to this silly dance. Is it true that the USA was built of IOUs to the Rothschilds? No. Texas, you are incorrect. Do you think Vivek Ramaswamy could have been a good competitor in the presidency? No. Vivek Ramaswamy does not understand foreign policy. Do you speak Esperanto or other languages? Spanish, sí, yo hablo. Nothing reveals a person standing before God more than their heart attitude towards Israel. Okay, I'll remember that. Do you not sell our emergency reserves? Yeah, the U.S. did do that to lower the price of gases. Yeah, we broke God's laws by yeah, okay. No, I am not. Do you think there would still be a Russia if Charles XII had gone from Moscow after Narva? No, he had no desire to do that, and the Russians had already kicked the Poles and the Mongols out. There'd always be a Russia. Russia is very resilient, especially when they're invaded. Is this a cult? Are you doing the meme from King of the Hill? No, this is a group of people who love learning about history and listen to me. Yeah, this is the place. What are your thoughts on North Korea sending troops to Ukraine? World War III, or in my opinion, 4, is a domino knock over away. We must be very careful in the next month. Good morning. Yeah, they do have a lot of oil. And they're always discovering more, too. The Virgin Queen, I love her. Okay. It's 1:35, yeah. I'm so sorry, Simon. Let's wrap this up. I don't know if I'm going to get to all the chat. Okay. I will wash dishes in the morning. Thank you for reminding me. This is the kind of odd question, but majority of countries have a red light district, including the UK. Because the U.S. is far more conservatively moral than most of the rest of the world, but bordellos and brothels were a huge part of the Wild West. Any place the United States ever has any sort of more libertarian rules, you will find brothels and bordellos. Look at Nevada. Whoever blesses Israel will be, yeah. Okay, Trump, bootlickers, yes. Do you dance every day the Gangnam Style? No. Question: Who will win the war between the Russia, UK, or USA? Neither. No one is winning that war. Could Kamala become a... Well, she was never worked there, so I don't know if she could be any good at McDonald's. I'm very good, Mandy. I hope you're good. Biden is trying to sabotage Trump on his way out. That could be. I don't know. He has no love lost between him. Yes, we're more Puritan. Do you own a tank? No. If you're thinking of a Christmas gift, though, I won't say no. Yeah, Simon does want to go to sleep, so we're gonna wrap it up. Oh boy. I'm a history teacher. Yes, I am teaching you right now. Hopefully. So if you guys have enjoyed all of this, be sure to like and subscribe. Check out the short form and long form content. Really appreciate it. 56 likes. A lot of people here today. We had such great talks, Simon. And Simon, show him some love in the chat. He did such an amazing job. I promise, Simon, we will only go an hour tomorrow. I'm going to try to get through most of a lecture in 40 minutes and give another 20 minutes. If anyone wants to come back and have a question that they didn't get answered today, I will do a short, brief Q&A at the very end tomorrow to make sure everybody gets their questions asked, because I really appreciate all of you guys. Favorite animals, puppies. Mine is kitties. And I really appreciate everybody. I appreciate you, Simon, so much. Where it's a lot earlier for you, so that's really great. And good morning to you, Raja. I don't agree with everything you said, but I'm so glad that you came and joined us. But yes, I will be looking forward to tomorrow. We'll be joining you 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please save that. I'm going to replace that and put that as the pinned message, so see that as the pinned message. We will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, talk about the Roman Republic and do a little Q&A at the end. Let's see. I hope you all have a great night and enjoy your Saturdays and Sunday mornings. Take care and have a good one. Like and subscribe. Check out my content. Really appreciate you guys, you friendly neighborhood historians. Have a good night now.